Hello, everybody out there and within the cardinal land. Welcome to our first episode of Businesses in Salem, Massachusetts. Now, reason why we're doing this podcast and many more is because Salem is like a second home to us. We've been there so many times we we ran out of fingers to count on. Okay, but our first business that we are going to focus on is a business um, owned by John Kozik, and it is a Ouija Witch Board Museum.
It's the Salem Witch.
And at Salem, Massachusetts. And John, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. This is great.
So, first of all, give us a location in Salem.
Yeah, Salem at 127 Essex Street, which is the main street in Salem if you haven't been there before. And I'm very close to Crowhaven Corner, which is the oldest witch shop in Salem. I'm actually the door to the right of them. But right on the main street where most of the stuff happens, if people watch videos of Salem in October, they see the chaos. We're that main street, Essex Street.
Yeah. Yeah, we was there last fall. So
Yeah, the first week in October.
Yes. If you want to know who is talking there's Amy, you guys, from Behind the Witch's Veil, along with Nico as our co-host for tonight. So I guess the first question we want to ask you is, how did you get into collecting these Ouija boards?
Like, why did you get intrigued by it?
Yeah, I mean, my interest, really starts when my grandmother had passed away. I inherited her Ouija board. And as a kid, she used it. I'd spy on her through the window or top stair, and she really flew on the board. She could yell out letters and numbers quicker than people could write down what she was saying. But, I really didn't think too much about it until she passed away, and I inherited her board. Her board looks very classic looking, the couples in the corner, the full moon, the half moon. I think what a lot of people think of when they think of a Ouija board. But when I went online to learn more about it, I was exposed to about 500 different boards that I had never seen before. I had no idea that Ouija was actually a brand of talking boards and that there are other competitors. And so that really made me start collecting them. And it was a few years into collecting before I finally met some other collectors, and we all had the same passion for collecting and wanting to know the history of these things. So we started a group called the Talking Board Historical Society, which is a registered nonprofit, and we research, preserve, celebrate the history of these boards. And then just on my own, having a big enough collection, eventually was opened the Salem Witchboard Museum. And then a year ago, I actually opened a second location in Baltimore. And Baltimore is where a lot of the Ouija history starts. That's where the brand started. And so, I ended up then leaving my job of 22 years just so I could talk about the Ouija board all day. And I love it. And so it's really, I think if you come to the museum, if you've met me before, you can see I'm very excited to be able to talk about the Ouija board with anyone who's willing to listen.
Yes, that is true. We've been there, of course. And you have quite a collection hanging up everywhere. Some of this collection is back in the early 1900s and has a lot of history. So what is one of the most, I guess, deep history that you have with one of your boards that you like to share?
Well, deep history, the oldest board that I have is from 1890. And it's really before the Ouija brand existed. So, kind of Civil War, post-Civil War is kind of how spirit communication is evolving and coming around. And people are knocking and pointing the alphabet, waiting for knocks from spirits they claim they're communicating with. But it's not up until 1890 when a guy named Charles Kennard in Baltimore has the idea to mass produce one of these boards. He calls it just a witch board originally, kind of a generic name. And a few months later is when a woman named Helen Peters had asked the board what it wanted to be called, which it spelled back Ouija. And then she asked, what does it mean? It spelled back good luck. So I have one of these early boards, pre-Ouija, that Charles Kennard made. It's pretty rare. It's only 5 known to exist. So it's pretty amazing to have it there at the museum to really show people what these originally looked like before that Ouija name.
Impressive. And yeah, I was going to ask you about Helen Peters, because I know you said in one of your YouTube videos, probably a year ago, 2 years ago, about no one actually invented the Ouija board.
Well, no one invented the boards themselves. Though, talking boards, witch boards, spirit boards, the generic names, those are really 2 separate spirit communication tools that are crossing paths. So as that conversation with spirits is evolving, people tried they claimed that spirits were knocking responses back to them. And so, the Fox sisters, the birth of modern spiritualism in America starts with them in 1848. But as other people make the claims, the conversations take a long time. They ask yes, no questions, wait for a knock or two, and then eventually they try to count these knocks to figure out what letter of the alphabet they might correspond with. And because it's just taking too long to, count, 7 times to get to that letter or 10 times to get, they just introduce a simple alphabet board and kind of just point to the alphabet and wait for the knock from the spirit. And then eventually the second device being called an automatic writing planchette, which is very similar to what you see with the Ouija board today, but would put a pencil at the very front of it and wheels in the back. And it works by just someone channeling a spirit through themselves and writing or drawing on a piece of paper, whatever came through. So those 2 devices kind of evolve, come together, and they're homemade for, approximately 10, maybe up to 20 years. We start reading about them by 1886, people using the 2 devices together. And it's not until 1890 then where Charles Kennard figures he can, mass produce his own board. So the board themselves, no inventor, but Ouija, the brand, there's 5 people over time who have all made claims to invent that board itself, that name. And so it gets pretty, the history gets pretty muddied with people's claims and trying to sort through who really did what. But Kennard is credited as first producing that board.
Wow. Now, I know because I know when I was back east in last fall, and I think I mentioned, I got corrected, I should say, because I say, I'm looking for a Ouija board. And someone says, no, it's Ouija. Is that it? So it's Ouija instead of Ouija. Interesting, though, because, a lot of people where I come from in the Midwest would say the Ouija board. So, so that is really interesting.
It's a common question I get, and the brand itself is pronounced Ouija. But you're not wrong if you say Ouija, because if you ask someone if they use the board, you would ask them if they Ouija. So Ouija is the verb and Ouija is the noun. So I think that's the main confusion. It's not, I meet people from all over who will say Ouija, and so it's not like one part of the country in particular. It's kind of everywhere. I think part of it is, for a very long time, it's marketed, Ouija as being they market it saying that the word is German and French for yes, yes. And I just think that some people don't know how to pronounce that in French. And so that's maybe part of the reason as well, besides it being a verb, but people not knowing how to pronounce it.
Wow. Now that is interesting, because I know probably somebody in the audience is like, I have taught, or I have learned something that this guy has taught me. So can you tell us any, have you have any, I should say, have you ever brought home any spirits from the boards?
No, I mean, for me personally, no. I kind of view the Ouija board as a tool to have a conversation. So very similar to a cell phone. So I don't believe that there's any spirits attached to the boards. I meet plenty of people who would disagree with me, of course, and tell me that, the spirit is attached to the board. and I certainly believe they believe that. But for me, no, I don't see that. But the people that come to the museum, they have all different kind of reactions. They'll be drawn to boards that were donated because the previous owners had a bad experience with them, and they'll just walk right to that board and be like, that's where they feel something. People have weird things that happen with technology and photographs of boards. Even in the space itself, of course, maybe feeling light. I just had someone 2 days ago. I didn't notice. They left the museum. They were with a group of 4 people. They left the museum early, and I just thought maybe they were bored. They weren't into it. And turns out, like a couple hours later, when the group came back, they said, "Oh, that first girl, she went outside. She was so lightheaded, she had to call an ambulance. So the fire truck and the ambulance just came 2 days ago." So people having reactions, getting sick, passing out, that kind of stuff in the space. But I think it's most interesting when someone goes to a board and tells me they feel something, and I know that that's a board that wasn't just collected by me, that it was donated from somebody else having a bad experience with it.
Wow. We do have a comment. There you go. Has the planchette moved on their own at the museum?
No, I've never seen that. I do have a handful of boards that have the planchette displayed on them, which I know some people can be scared about that, believing that you're kind of keeping the phone off the hook, so to speak. But for me, I've never seen anything like that happen. The closest I can say that I've seen is we have cameras in the museum, and at night, one camera in particular, which is in the back part of the room, which is known to have more paranormal activity than the other side, that camera never shuts off. It feels as though there's something in the room the whole time. And when I first opened early in the morning, when there were no lights in the museum whatsoever, just an exit light at the back door, the alarm went off a couple times. And when you slow motion the video, you see like what looks like a shadow kind of lurching up from behind the case to the front of it. I've seen that, and certainly, the people's reactions. But as far as the planchettes moving on their own, I've never seen that, no.
I know when we was out there, we was with my son and daughter-in-law, and I'm like, hey, just go in here. And my son and my youngest daughter and myself, we do the board. Not quite a bit, but probably a few times a year. And she's been around with us while we do it, and stuff. And she's not really petrified of them, but she would not go in. She goes, "Oh, I'm feeling sick. I can't go in." I'm just like, "You're not feeling sick. You just don't want to go in." Now I know when we was out there, probably a year and a half ago, somebody came out almost crying out there because it was just something that said, "Oh, something was trying to attack me or something." And I'm looking at them like, seriously, But what I know, maybe they did or anything. But have you ever had customers that's just like, "No way, nah, I'm out of here," or "You're crazy, dude"?
Yeah, I mean,
You're not,
I do. I mean, first of all, I do see people who come in who are very nervous to be around Ouija boards. And I'm very grateful that they want to come in and at least maybe face that fear and try to learn something more about it. I have people who have come in and immediately felt some kind of pressure or dizziness or sickness and have to leave, unfortunately. But, those things, I should point out that before the Ouija boards were even brought into the room, that space in itself has been known for paranormal activity. And so neighbors, when I was setting the space up, I had probably a half a dozen neighbors come in and all tell me very similar stories that they had felt touched or pushed or scratched or, just had that presence, hearing things. And so that was there before Ouija boards even got brought in. So I don't contribute it to the Ouija boards at all if people feel that. I think that my energy, my positiveness towards these boards really comes through when I talk to people, and I think that would outweigh anything negative if they do feel that way. But certainly that does happen. People have reactions to it. Sometimes it's funny because they don't realize they had it. So, like I said, the back room is known for being more active, and some people, they might step a foot in, or they might just get to the threshold and not cross in. And it's not till I start talking to them about what some people experience that they realize, like, wait a minute, I didn't go back there. I was back there and I left there quick. They didn't realize their body had told them to get out. So that does happen as well. But being like super negative to the space and maybe that doesn't happen. I meet people who are at least open to wanting to learn more, even if they feel uncomfortable. They still want to stick it out and try to learn something.
Well, I know when we was, well, like I said, we go out there quite a bit. I know when I was there, and you was there too. And, you are a very positive person. You have, such energy that is just so lovely, So, nothing to be, I'm telling the audience, nothing to be scared of. When you go in
I
there,
remember
just go in there with a positive mind.
It was like busy season, and I called you guys just to ask a question, and you guys were so positive and like kind to me. And a lot of people during like that kind of pressure, they don't give you like not a great presence on the phone.
Yeah. Because October is, to me,
it's tough. October is a
it's a bad time.
October is such a different beast in Salem. Everyone is very stressed, the workforce, and so you're seeing the most amount of people in 1 month. That's literally a year's worth of people for for that 1 month. And for me personally, I feel bad because if you come like this time of year, I mean, you can pretty much stay as long as you want, ask as many questions. There's really no pressure for time, and I love that. I like by being there and kind of telling stories, not just about the items, but I wasn't how the item was acquired or anything like that. I think it's a very special thing.
I agree. I was just in Salem like a month ago. Yeah. And it's so much easier to get around and see everything and talk to everyone.
Yeah. To me, I like the off season because it's not as crowded, not in the, not long lines. You can get around better without elbow to elbow and everything. And I think you can spend more time in the business and really actually look and talk to the owners. Anything. So it's awesome.
I was there this last October, and my brother's girlfriend was just near the museum, and she's like, I feel something weird, and I'm like, I think you're okay. I'm like, it's just Salem, you're fine.
So with you are on a talking board society. That is so interesting.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, I would love to. So it's a registered nonprofit. And like I said, we research, preserve, celebrate the history of these boards. And besides really, being the foremost research into this subject, through the president, Robert Murch, he's the one that uncovered Helen's story. So Helen, again, who named the Ouija, and she eventually proved it worked at the patent office, she was someone that was written out of history for over 100 years. And Murch uncovered her story. And so we've been able to, I suppose it started when we were looking for where Elijah Bond was buried. Elijah is the person who patented the Ouija board and was buried in an unmarked grave. And if you Google Ouija grave, you probably might be familiar with seeing it. We eventually put that headstone in. And at that time, we were just collectors and friends. And we thought it was really sad that here's this guy that patented the Ouija, and he wasn't acknowledged in any way. So we just helped raise money to put that headstone in. And then it became such a positive thing. It was the most visited grave at Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore that we decided, hey, we should keep doing this kind of stuff. And that's when we officially became registered nonprofit. And then since then, we've done with Helen. Funny, years later, we find out that Helen, and then find out that she was buried in an unmarked grave as well. So we helped put a headstone in for her. Where the Ouija board was named in Baltimore is now a 7-Eleven, and there's actually a plaque hanging in the store. We had permission from the corporate office to put the plaque up where the Ouija was named. And the very first public landmark in Maryland is actually a William Fold Ouija factory. We worked with the state for 2 years to convince them to make that. So we've done quite a few things. Actually, Ouijazilla was back in 2019. That was the world's largest Ouija board that we unveiled in Salem. And the vice president, Rick Schreck, he's the guy that made it. Took a year and a half to do so. But yeah, so, besides hanging plaques and doing that, just researching and wanting to know as much as we can. And it's kind of funny because if you go to a book that's older than 11 years, it's not going to be correct. I mean, Helen Peters will not be in that book. And so it's crazy to think of how much stuff has really been uncovered or rediscovered just in the last 10 years alone.
Wow.
That's really intriguing. I've heard of the tombstone that you were talking about.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a lot about it, like on social media and stuff like that, about people visiting and trying to communicate to the spirit and everything. So that's really fascinating.
Nico, do you have any questions?
I do. Let's see. For those that are unfamiliar, what's the difference between a Ouija board, a talking board, and a spirit board?
So the generic name for all of these boards would be spirit board, talking board, or witch board. And technically, Ouija is a brand of talking boards. So sort of like Kleenex to tissues, Ouija is the talking boards. And so Ouija is by far the biggest brand. It's probably the only brand most people would know anything about, because when it first came out, it was actually protected by a patent for 16 years. So that meant that there was no competitors making alphabet boards with a pointing device for 16 years. And then when you legally could make something called maybe like the Mystic board or the Zodiac board, most people would be like, I never heard of those. I don't want to use it. And so, in October, if you asked 1,000 people on the street in front of the museum, name a second brand of talking board, no one would probably be able to do it. And if you asked them, well, first of all, they'd say, what's a talking board? They wouldn't even know. And then if you said another type of Ouija board, they'd be like, there's another type. So, at this point, Ouija is really, I refer to it as the Ouija Museum. I refer to them as Ouija boards, all of them, because it's so universal. It's the only brand we know that, it's pretty much what everyone knows it as, but technically a brand.
Okay. Let's see. Do you personally use Ouija boards? And if so, do you have any experiences?
I don't use the Ouija, and I really would hate for anyone to think it's because I'm nervous or afraid. I love these. I believe that they work. They worked very well for my grandmother. Like I said, she would use it alone and flew on the thing, yelling out letters and numbers quicker than people could write down what she was saying. But it just doesn't work for me like it did for her. And I kind of make the analogy, I've been a musician for over 35 years, and I make a joke that if Jimi Hendrix was my father, I wouldn't want to play guitar. I'm not going to be as good on guitar as he was. And it's kind of how I feel about the Ouija. I believe they work, and they work differently for everyone. But, you influence the board quite a bit, whether you know it or not. And the rules or superstitions you might have might be different than Chrissy or Amy. But, it's not wrong. No one's wrong. It just works differently. And so for me, I'm just very nervous it won't work at all for me, that I will influence into not working at all for me. You're meeting probably the only person in the world who makes a living talking about Ouija boards. And, by not using it means I can't tell you everything about them. I know a lot, but I can't tell you everything. So that doesn't make me the expert that either I think I am or other people might think I am. But to be honest with you, in the last couple of years, I've decided I will use the Ouija. I'm really just waiting to use it with my friend Karen. Karen is the secretary for the Talking Board Historical Society, and she's used the Ouija for over 50 years and never had a bad experience, got very positive, inspirational messages. And so I feel most confident if it's going to work for me, it'll work with her.
Right on.
I personally don't have an experience I could share in that way, because I mean, I have used it when I was younger and things like that. But the one story I do like to tell is that the board didn't work very well for my mother. My mother, when she was about 12 years old, used the Ouija with her girlfriend Linda and my grandmother, and the board accurately predicted both of their future husbands' names, Lawrence and Dennis.
That's really intriguing. I completely understand when you say like you're nervous that it won't work for you as well as her, because like my sister's really good with the Ouija board, but the Ouija board doesn't have like the same effect on like I do with it.
And maybe pendulum or tarot might be more your thing, or something else.
I have always had experience with the paranormal, and she doesn't have as much experience. Like she's not as sensitive as I am, so it's just like different for both of us.
Yep.
I think it's because I kind of like doubt it in a way, you know. So I completely.
To view it as it's a tool or like an instrument, and some people are like more naturally inclined to that specific tool versus others.
Exactly.
Like,
that's
some
why I
people
mentioned.
are really, really good.
That's how I view it as well, because there's so many different types of divination, and people don't even understand. Like a lot of people are scared of the Ouija board, but any type of divination can give you the same effect in a way.
Yeah.
Yes. I meet people who are more nervous with the Ouija, but will do pendulum. And I'm always like,
that astounds me.
It's the same thing. And, obviously, the 500 plus horror movies that put the Ouija board in it influence people in some way. And there are less horror movies with pendulum in it. I'm very excited. In the last couple of years, there's been a few horror movies with pendulum. The newest Exorcist remake had it in there. The newest Witchboard film made it in there. And so I think, we're going to either see people be more nervous around the pendulum or less nervous around Ouija.
There's been some really good tarot card movies, horror movies, and those have been fantastic. The one that was on Netflix, when I saw that one, I want that deck so bad, and it was a 1 of 1, and I was just like, "You'll need to sell this deck, please."
They should, yeah.
We have a question here from the audience. Do you find you need to do cleansing of energies around the Ouija displays?
So I don't, and I think with the Ouija, when it comes to rules of what you believe, your gut instinct is kind of the best rule you might have. And so if you're going to use a Ouija board and you think like, well, I want to make sure nothing's attached to it, or then you want to cleanse it or sage, whatever it is. But for me, like I said, I don't view them in that way. I kind of just think of them like a cell phone. And if you used my phone and had a bad conversation with it, I wouldn't sage or cleanse it afterwards. So that's me personally. But again, if you would like to do something like that, it's all about what you're comfortable doing. And so I think people get confused as to what's a rule, because most of what we think are rules with the Ouija are mostly urban legends, superstitions, things like that have evolved. But it's really personal preference. It's again, your gut instinct.
I completely agree.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like I said, I do the board. My daughter, my son, we never had any bad experience, really.
Well, my brother Jay has.
Well, he had a little bit of experience, but it wasn't bad. It was.
I've had more. Like I am more scared of dolls than I would ever be of a Ouija board. But that's because I've had my own personal experience with that.
So how long you been up? About 10 years now?
No, I mean, only 2019. I opened up August of 2019, and really only a few months later is when COVID really hit, and we closed for probably about 5 months. In Massachusetts, we couldn't reopen until what they called phase 3. So we were one of the last things to actually open museums and attractions like that. but we survived it. And I when I first opened, I was self-guided. The museum was self-guided, and I would just leave my day job and go right there every day, and then stay there until we closed. And over time, I just kept cutting my day job hours back so I could be at the museum more. And then in October, every Friday, taking off. And then almost 3 years ago now is when I finally was like, okay, I just need to do the museum full time. And so it's been 2019, and then just over a year ago in May, this month, I just celebrated my 1 year anniversary in Baltimore. And that location came about because so much history in Baltimore and everything that the Talking Board Historical Society had done. And I did a very similar thing where I found these great guys who run an oddity store called Bazaar, and they had some free space. So I was able to work with them to curate the space. They kind of run it for me. So that's a self-guided tour, but I try to go down a few times a year. I was just there about a month or two ago. I swapped out about 40 items. So I try to like constantly change things out so that if people come back, within a year, they're seeing different stuff,
Yeah, that's really cool. You have a lot of like interesting boards there. I saw there was one from like Toys R Us, and I was kind of like shocked by that.
Oh yeah, I had one from Toys R Us. I had a question. So I live here in Nebraska, and south of me there was a factory called the Ouija Queen boards. Do you have one?
Omaha.
Yep.
I do. Yes, there's actually, to nerd out a little bit, there are 4 variations of that board that I know of. There's a brown one, and then 3 different types of colors or materials that they've used. But yeah, made in Omaha, Nebraska in the 1940s, World War II era, which if you come to the museum or you look at a picture of the museum online, you'll see a giant display of Ouija boards. And the Ouija Queen both of them are off to the left-hand side, but it's amongst probably about 80 boards that were made in America just during World War II alone. So sadly, a very popular time and a very competitive time. So yes, have a couple of them on display.
I like the round one. I don't know why.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some different shapes. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
There's some weird ones. I saw one recently that came out by a toy company that's a Talk to Jesus spirit board.
Yes.
And I was just like, it was intriguing, but I'm sitting there like, I don't know how many people are like, that sounds counterintuitive for some people, but okay.
Yeah. That board, it caused some controversy when it came out. I would call that more satire. I don't think they were dead serious about using it in that way. But it brings up a good point that, there are other uses for the Ouija than just spirit communication. I mean, some people do use it as like somewhat of an oracle that, helps to predict past, present, and future events. And in the museum, I really like to show some of the fringe uses. We have had a board that someone created to speak to their guardian angel. That's hanging up now.
Yep.
There's quite a few of those boards. There are boards that been created to try to speak to someone's past life, try to read other people's minds. And there's actually my friend Karen, who I mentioned earlier. She claims to communicate with plants and animals through the Ouija board. And I mean, I'm open to all those things. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard a Ouija story where I thought someone was lying to me. So I basically, I believe they've experienced whatever it is. So I kind of like these fringe boards to find out what the kind of conversations people had using them.
Exactly.
My sister was talking about an experience she had with my brother about communicating to like a corn spirit, which is kind of hilarious because we live in Iowa. Iowa's known for corn.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, you're surrounded by them. Have fun.
Yeah. Which one are you talking to?
Yeah.
When I'm an amateur folklorist, and there's like 1,000 different corn spirits. When she told me that, I'm laughing because I was like, which one?
Yeah.
It's like, no, now you piqued my interest. Like, which one did you talk to?
I just think it's funny that she's from Iowa and she was talking to a corn
Oh no,
spirit.
they got a name. They got a name and everything. Yeah.
It was interesting.
So what do you think about when someone says that they had a Ouija demon.
Like a
Talk to
traumatic
them.
experience through the Ouija board. Well, that can happen with any divination tool too.
Yeah, I mean, they're
Yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of people claim that kind of stuff to me. And like I said, with any Ouija story, I believe they believe. I've never heard one story I thought the person was lying to me. For the demon stories, I think a lot of times people tend to look for a negative to associate to the Ouija board. And an example of that would be, the rule that some people believe that you're always supposed to say goodbye on the Ouija.
Yeah.
It's a pretty popular rule. And that really didn't start until after the movie The Exorcist. Prior to the movie, it's not a rule on the box. And, women sadly use these alone to speak, maybe to a deceased husband or a father or brother. But The Exorcist really changed people's views towards the Ouija, of course. And I tell people, if you believe you're supposed to say goodbye on a Ouija, then do it,
Yeah.
I don't say goodbye to most people I talk to in a day. So it's something I don't. If you believe it and you forget or you think you forget to say goodbye, more than likely the first bad thing that happens to you, you get a splinter, you stub your toe, you're probably going to start blaming the Ouija board. And did that really cause it, or is it just a coincidence,
I also feel like with anything, if you give it power and
Yes.
you give it fear, then something's going to happen.
Yep, I agree as well. And again, the Ouija board doesn't have the power to me. It's just a tool to have the conversation. Plenty of people give it that power, and that's why they might think that maybe something's attached to it, or you open a portal or things like that, or you can't leave the planchette on the board. Again, I don't think that way. I think it's people giving it that power.
I agree.
I agree completely.
It's interesting.
Do you have people donating boards to you out of fear, like they've had a bad experience and they're mailing you boards?
So the Talking Board Historical Society, I control the post office box. So there's been about 30 boards total that have been donated to them. Because, sadly, if you have a board that you have had a bad experience with and you want to get rid of it, if you go online, there's a lot of really conflicting things, break it in half, break it into 7 pieces, sprinkle it with holy water, buried in a church graveyard. And so as the TBHS being experts on the history, people have reached out and been like, well, give it to us. So we've had some. Now that I have a museum, people now send them to the museum. The funny thing is, every now and then I get to the museum early and there'll be a Ouija board leaning against the door. So sort of like a baby drop off, at the fire station, they'll just randomly abandon a Ouija board at the museum. So those have happened. Or if I'm not there, if I leave at 6:00 and someone comes in right after I left, they'll be like, John, someone dropped us off last night. No, nothing. The TBHS boards, I like it because a lot of them, I'm the point of contact for it. So, usually they would reach out ahead of time and say, hey, I have this board, this is what happened, and I just don't feel comfortable having it anymore. And so I'm able to stay with the conversation that when I eventually receive the board, I can then contact them and let them know that it's been received, and I can check to see how things have been. And my experience with that is, of 30 boards donated, 28 of those times, problems went away when the boards went away. So giving it to me or anyone willing to take it seems to be what I would suggest to do if you have one of these boards. The 29th time, there was a board sent without a return address on the package, so I don't know who to contact for that. And the number 30 board was one of the first ones that came to the post office box. The postal worker had written on the outside of the box, "Careful, salt is leaking." They sent it with about 5 pounds of salt. The whole box was filled to the top with salt, with a mini Bible, I should say, as well. The New Testament was sent in there as well. And that person in particular, the problems went away. They lasted for about another 3 months after I received the board, but eventually they went away.
Oh, wow.
That's really interesting. So if you have a board you can't handle, just gift it.
Just gift it, yeah.
Gift it to anyone willing to take it. Would gladly take it because the TBHS, we have them. And when we do paranormal conventions and stuff, we kind of tell the stories. And you know,
Oh, yeah.
some stories are similar, but you'd be surprised. There's stories that just people have that are not textbook. You know, they're not what the last person donated that had the problem. It's
Yeah.
not the same problem every board.
It's
That's really cool, and it's a great way to continue on the stories of those boards.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, that is really interesting.
Well, I always
too.
think it's interesting anyway when people have like a haunted item or anything and they have like a good story to go with.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that's the best.
Oh, yes. That is. So being in Salem as a business owner and everything, and I know you get all types of diversity in coming into your store and everything. What would you say would be your main customers that comes in? Would you say it'd be just like tourists or riches or just
Mixed of everybody?
Mix, yeah.
It's a mix. I mean, you know, locals will come to the museum once in a while, but they're not coming, you know, every other month or something like that. I do special events so that they will come, you know, movie nights and things like that that are meant for locals to come. But I think obviously tourists are the biggest, and usually it's a lot of repeat tourists, people who have been to the museum before, you know, a handful of times. If they come to Salem often, they will stop in every time. I think because I put new stuff out, and also because I try to tell different stories. And I think they want to see if I'm still as excited to talk about the Ouija board as I was, you know, 3 years ago, that kind of thing. But, you know, when I sell, I have quite a few boards for sale at the museum, and I mostly sell to people who want to use the Ouija. So it's a little bit different than having, you know, if you have an antique turn of the century board, you know, from 1900 or whatever, some people just want to collect it. But I need to have a planchette to go with it because I'm meeting people who then want to come and use the board. So I think that's the big difference is, you know, all these boards that are made now, you know, in the last 6 months, probably about 7 or 8 boards have been made, from Exorcist to Beetlejuice to Wednesday to a Salem edition to a couple different travel sites.
Did you see that Five Below is now selling them?
Yes. I had to go grab one the other day. I just did a post on Instagram a couple days ago. Those were making the rounds. My friend Becky Galentine, she had done a TikTok video about it, and it seemed like stores were selling out quick. And I met a woman I know. She's been to the museum before, but she specifically called me about having her kid's birthday party at the museum because she had gotten 10 of those boards. So she was hoping to give those out as gifts.
That's so, I love that. That would be
I would love that gift.
I have 4 little boys and they're all into like spooky stuff, so I could see them trying to talk me into doing
that.
Yeah. All they have to do is come to grandma. I'll show them.
I don't need
that. You know, for $5, it's a nice quality piece. You know, it's thick, it lays flat. They shrunk the planchette down to fit the size of the board, and I like them because, you know, I call it like the travel size. You know, if you got a suitcase, it's going to fit in there no problem. You know.
Cool.
I think that's really. I like that.
Yeah.
I want to do like I'm thinking about going to TikTok. Well, doing a TikTok about going there and picking up one. Oh, so you can show people how they are. That's a good idea.
You got to do it quick because they're disappearing from the shelves quick. I see a lot of videos, a lot of posts.
I'm going to hit up 2 cities and see if they have one because I know there's 2 Five Belows in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. So.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Oh.
It'd be cool.
Okay.
And then I'll give it to my sibling.
They would like it.
Yeah.
They won't say anything about it. Our kids are not afraid of anything. We taught them early. Nice. I mean, they're raised up in this path, and so they see mom and dad do all kinds of.
It takes a lot to scare me. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
It does. It does. So, how many boards do you approximately have in Salem?
In Salem, there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 on display. Baltimore probably has maybe, you know, 80 to 100 on display. And then in the basement I'm in right now, there's at least 600 over there next to me. But, you know, so I have quite a few boards. I don't count them. I've never been a guy that counts I don't know. But I'd roughly 800 or so that I would guess. And then I have a lot of the ephemera, the magazine, the covers, the ads, articles, a lot of things that eventually will go to a display, books, movies, all that stuff, because the boards are cool, but they don't tell the whole story. So I like to, if I can show a magazine like Saturday Evening Post, the best example, and seeing that Norman Rockwell picture of a guy and a girl using the Ouija board, it tells a whole different story that the board itself can't tell. You can see how people were using it, how risque it was during the 1920s, how, dating, kind of loving the Ouija board. So that in particular would be something that a board just by itself telling a story behind it, the visual of the magazine is way better.
Wow. God, I had a question.
I couldn't even imagine having that many boards. That's a lot.
That's
cool.
That is a lot of board. Oh, we have a question from someone. Do you have a lot of homemade boards in the collection?
I don't. I have a few that either friends have made for me or I've met the artist and I'm really into their stuff and I have it. It's not a huge part of my collection. I have my other friend Calvin. That's really what he specializes in, is antique homemade boards. His thought process is if you took the time to make it, then you were making it to use. I don't have a lot of artisan boards. Some of them are better than others, and some of them, like if they're wood burned or something like that, they look cool, but they're not. Be difficult to use sometimes if they have like a deep gouge in it or something. The planchette's gonna kind of hit it like a speed bump, so to speak. But I think Etsy is a great place to grab those kind of boards. But as far as what I collect, I tend to stick with the mass-produced boards, just because it tells a little bit different story. Most of the stories I tell. The homemade ones I'll probably get into more, especially I'd like to do an exhibit of it. I think it would be pretty fascinating for people to see just how different those boards are. Not just the materials, but the designs. And but as far as what I have here, not a lot. Maybe a dozen homemade boards.
Have you ever thought about doing a book about the boards?
Yeah, I would love to do a book. I would ideally want to work with somebody who has done a book in the past and do it that way. I'm not too opposed to self-publishing something. Being a musician, I've done probably about 50 records, and doing a record in a book is very similar to me, where you write a song, you record it, a book, you write the story, you print it, getting it manufactured. But at this point in my life, with everything that's going on, I would rather just work with somebody else who can say, John, give us this story, and then we'll edit it, and we'll figure out the page count, we'll figure out the size, we'll figure out how many pages are going to be color. So I'd love to do a book, but right now there's nothing in the works for that.
When you do a book, let us know. We will promote it, and
Thank you.
Of course, read it. It would be interesting. I know my kids would be picking it up. Maybe not Amy, but and my other two kids, Amber and Jay would probably pick it up too. And I know Nico would too, because
I'm a lover of history and folklore and
nice.
Yeah. And your location again before we close out, for Baltimore and for Salem.
Yep. So Salem is the location I spend the most time at. It's at 127 Essex Street in Salem, right downtown, the main street. And I'm usually there 11 to 6 every day. Might take a Tuesday or Wednesday off in the wintertime. But stop in, hear some stories there. If you can't make it to Salem, you can make it to Baltimore. I'm at 3536 Chestnut Street, right on the corner of 36. Sorry, the corner. I had to think about it a second. 36th, and right in the neighborhood called Hamden, and a store called Bazaar, Bazaar, and that's where I'm at.
And next to Salem, you buy Crow Havens, that's Lorelei store now.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, and which is one of the oldest witch stores.
Yeah,
And
it's what Lori Cabot originally opened. Yeah, it's the.
Yeah, Lori Cabot did
Yep.
open it, and then Lorelei took it over. Yes.
Yep.
And then you was between that store and what other store?
Oh, on the other side of me is Why Not Swans.
Why not?
So
Okay.
I should probably point out that if you come to Salem and you go to 127 Essex, you have to walk through a Harry Potter store to get to me. So I'm not right on the street itself at 127. You walk into a Harry Potter store, and then you have to go see the clerk, who then allows you in the back room where I am.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I was in my head thinking like, okay, I went down that street many, many times. And it's like, okay, I know you can just pass it if you don't know actually where to go to, into. Yeah, that's why I was bringing up. I go, what was the other store?
Yeah, I don't even think about that, but it's a little strange. But by doing so, it makes it that, people seek it out, or when they stumble upon it, they're like, wait, there's a Ouija museum behind that desk? What? And so I like that aspect of it, because it keeps the museum at a pace where I think everybody comes in, gets a lot of attention, and I can really kind of tell stories and not rush you out of there. And if I was on the street, it changes that dynamic a little bit more, where everyone can't get the same amount of time. It's gotta, you got a lot more people coming through. And so, but yeah, Harry Potter store, the back of the store. Yeah.
You got any more questions, Nick, before we call it a night?
No, I think that's it.
Wow. How about you, Amy?
No, I think he answered everything. I'm definitely going to have to stop by there and say hi.
Please do. I'd love to see you in person.
Yeah.
And make sure you mention your name, too.
Yeah, I will.
She'd be one of those shy women that just look around and not say anything. I'm like,
I'll probably, because I love history, I'll probably just be like in awe of everything. Trying to read everything.
Always tell her, did you say hi? No.
Yeah.
Like,
I did better this last time I was in Salem. I said I talked to people. I got out of my bubble.
She's shy though.
Well, there's no reason to be shy back where I will make sure you will not be shy, because what I've learned with having a museum is I was a very shy person. And if I went to a museum, I wouldn't want to ask questions. I would feel like, oh, you should know that or whatever. And then now that I'm in the museum and I'm in my comfort zone and I love talking to people, I understand that some people might be a little shy. So I'll usually try to engage conversation by at least pointing out what they might be looking at, or, telling them something that one of the signs doesn't say. So I try to engage in that way, because, I think that when I do that, people are like, wow, I do want to hear more of these stories, from John. And so, but I understand people being shy. That was me up until I had a museum and I was on the other side of it.
That was me. Well, you know me. I would just go in there. Hey, John, how you doing?
Yeah. Hey, you can't get to shut up.
Probably, yeah. I'd be asking all these questions, and you'd be like, "Oh, would this woman just shut up and leave my store?"
No, not at all. I love questions. When people ask me a question, especially like I know it's like, something I thought about for a while or whatever. I'm like, hell yeah, keep them coming. I want to be stumped. I want to, if I can't answer it, I'll gladly just tell you, oh, I don't know. I'll try to find out. I would never make something up, but I like that, because, I want to tell things that I think people are most interested in hearing. And if you want to hear about something deeper, I want to know. I want to be able to tell you that. So
that'd be my husband. I would be asking you questions, but my husband would be like, just on you all the time. Like, okay, what's this? How about this? He doesn't shut up. He can, like it says, I take him someplace, he talked to a perfect stranger for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's like, who are you talking
to? It's like a half hour.
So, but John, thank you so much for coming on. And
my pleasure.
I love your museum and everything. I do advise everybody to, when you're out in Salem, Massachusetts, if you ever get out there, please stop in. Say hi to John. Tell John, hey, I saw you on Within the Cauldron podcast. And buy a board or ask some more questions. I think he would love to answer you.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the people that asked the questions tonight. I love that. So thank you for those as well.
So just give us a few minutes while we go off the air. And I just want everybody to subscribe, like, and share. And we'll see you next time. Blessings all.
Great Goddess, I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am Great Goddess, I am so thankful to have